Hi, my name is Heather Applegarth, and I'm honored to have been invited to talk to you about shared educational leadership and digital intercultural communication. The goal of this presentation is to provide you with actionable strategies to improve shared leadership in an intercultural digital context. Any leadership team in any context is only as effective as its communication. Effective communication involves understanding three elements: the people involved, the message, and the channel of delivery. This presentation is divided into those three elements. First, we will discuss the people side of the communication exchange. Next, the message itself. Finally, some recommendations to improve the channel of delivery that can strengthen the intended communication. This presentation is based on research and effective practices other leaders have used. I also want to mention that the strategies I am recommending come from a place of personal experiences and from life's greatest teacher, failure. I've learned many communication lessons the hard way. One point that I want to make continually throughout this presentation is that intercultural does not mean international. Intercultural communication can take place with anyone, anywhere. So let's begin with the people involved in communication. A shared goal or commitment may not be enough to make your message understood as it was intended. There are many filters that a message travels through before it reaches a person. This is best explained in terms of identity. Arredondo and Glauner created the dimensions of the personal identity model to give detail to the different influences that create identity. They are divided into three sections labeled A, B, and C. The A dimension includes age, culture, race or ethnic identity, gender identity, language, physical and mental health, sexual orientation, and socioeconomic standing. B personality traits are education, geographical location, hobbies and recreational interests, military experience, personal relationships, religious practices, and work experience. C personality traits are outside influences, such as historical events. The factors in A and C influence the factors in Section B. As we move forward from the COVID-19 pandemic, we will be sure to see the effects from this C dimension in ourselves and coming generations. The A, B, and C dimensions of this model can apply to how people engage in and give importance to education and affect one's communication practices. A person's identity and perceived position in relationship to others can affect the production and reception of messages. This brings me back to my reminder that intercultural does not mean international. Intercultural communication can take place with anyone, anywhere. The dimensions in this model are influenced by culture. Let's talk about the message. What are you saying? We're going to take the perspective of a message and travel through the landscape that a message encounters before it is received. To make this point, we will look at elements from different models of communication that can apply to written, verbal, and nonverbal communication. Let's use the analogy of a pinball machine. The ball is the message, and it is sent out. On its way through to the final destination, it encounters. First, its physical context. How is this message being sent? Next, its social context. Is this a professional or personal context? Third, its psychological context. What state of mind is the receiver in? Relaxed, stressed, happy, sad? Fourth, its semantical context. Is this message in the receiver's first language, second language, Are there nuances in this message that may not be understood? Finally, general noise. What environmental distractions are present for the receiver? Are they home with their children? Is there noise outside of their window? The dynamics of the message's journey will depend on the sender and the receiver. Do they speak the same language? Are they both engaged in the same social and cultural context? Do they have nonverbal cues such as smiles, gestures, and body language to guide its path? Ultimately, was the same message that was sent is what was received. It is important to note that a digital context removes nonverbal cues such as tone, intonation, and body language. The absence of these cues increases the risk for misinterpretation of messages. Considering the variables involving the people and the message, how can we be sure that our messages are received as we intended? In the context of digital communication for shared educational leadership, this will involve two factors: the shared leadership approach and individual personal practices. Let's start with shared leadership practices. For shared educational leadership that exists in a digital and intercultural space, 5 factors must be kept in mind. Number 1, foundation. Build your foundation on shared commitments and goals with the firm understanding that the end result may not look the same everywhere, nor should it. Write them down. Compare and contrast how they look in different places, and make sure that they are still achieving the end goal. This will take time and conversation among many shareholders. However, putting this effort in at the beginning with this firm yet fluid concept can help ensure a shared outcome. Number 2, approach. Countries approach education differently based on cultural and societal norms or expectations. What is standard and operational in one country may not translate directly to another as worthwhile or relevant. Personal, community, regional, and national identity come into play here. Instead, allow for a more fluid application of established goals. Design. The design of the educational experience should be up to the teachers executing it. They know their audience. Number 4, measurement. The measurement of outcomes should align with the design and audience. Standard, uniform assessments should not be applied. Number 5, evaluation and comparison. Moving away from standard and uniform measurements means that evaluation and comparison of outcomes should allow for these differences. If adjustments are needed, include all stakeholders in that conversation. Implementing these recommendations will require clear communication. For help with this, I refer to the seminal work of Lorraine Barna. In her article, Stumbling Blocks in Intercultural Communication, there's timeless advice for navigating intercultural relationships. Number 1, assumptions. What you consider obvious may not be obvious to someone else. She called it assuming similarity instead of difference. The second stumbling block is language. If the communication involves non-native speakers of a language, semantical meaning may not be conveyed through colloquial use of the shared language. Third, nonverbal misinterpretations. Gestures are not always universal and can be viewed as offensive in different places. The fourth stumbling block are preconceptions and stereotypes. We create or rely on them as knowledge in the face of uncertainty, but it takes away the practice of observing and asking questions about what someone's behaviors or practices really mean to them. Number 5 is the tendency to evaluate, to approve or disapprove the statements and actions of the other person or group, rather than try to comprehend completely the thoughts and feelings expressed from the worldview of the other. The sixth is high anxiety. Too much anxiety causes people to resort to hostility or aggression as a coping mechanism. It is important to understand your own triggers and limitations and manage them. The seventh stumbling block is culture shock. This would apply to physical environments. When a person spends a sustained period of time in another country, their body experiences mental and physical reactions from constantly adapting to what is unfamiliar. Recognizing and managing this stress is important to overcoming those reactions. Leaders and team members should revisit this advice as needed. Now, let's talk about recommendations for individual communication practices. Individuals can engage in 3 practices that will help make sure that the message they wish to send is the message that is received. First, create your own user manual. This concept was first presented to me through a communication sent by the Vice President of Instruction at a college I work for. The premise is for a manager to create a manual for his or her employees to use to know the best way to work with him or her and avoid conflict or setbacks by being transparent. Ivar Krokard, who was the CEO at Questback, described his leadership strategy of creating a user's manual. In an interview with the New York Times, he said, "So, I tried to think of a way to shorten the learning curve when you build new teams and bring new people on board. The worst way of doing it, which is regrettably the normal way, is that people just go into a new team and start working on the task at hand, and then spend so much time battling different personalities without really being aware of it. Instead, you should stop and get to know people before you move forward." This concept can be applied and modified for the use of an educational leadership team that works digitally. Each team or organization should tailor these questions to what suits them best. Some examples could be, what should people know about the way that I work? What is my preferred process? How do I prefer to communicate with my team? What are the hours I work every day? What attributes do I value the most in a relationship with colleagues? How do I learn best? Through reading, listening, or hands-on engagement? What do I expect from myself as a member of this team? What do I expect from my colleagues as members of this team? How do I handle conflict? How do I collaborate? Asking the questions who, what, when, where, why, and how, as they apply to the team and its goals, will help to develop the appropriate questions. My second recommendation is to consider restructuring your email communications in a template that has divided sections. Use short sentences or bullet points, and avoid slang or overly descriptive language. Use email only for the purpose of relaying general information. If you have something to say that requires more than simple directives or information, consider other avenues. Third, apply the principles of universal design for learning in your longer messages. UDL has 3 main principles: providing multiple means of engagement, representation, and action or expression. I recommend applying this to your communication messages in the following way. Record your message on a video. You can include cues and body language this way. Use technology that will transcribe your message or script it before. Use technology that will capture only the audio of your message. In one recording, you can be provided with 3 ways to communicate your message. The receiver has the option of choosing which is the best way in which he or she receives and understands the message. If there is anything left unclear in the first choice, there are 2 other ways to clarify, understand, and receive the intended message. I applied this recommendation to this presentation so that you could experience the choice in how you receive the information. Being an educator is not an easy job. It is my hope that this presentation has given you at least one idea to improve your workflow and process. No system is perfect. There will always be the possibility of a misunderstanding. Communicating consistently and offering people a choice in how they receive their digital communication across physical and cultural borders could help to alleviate misunderstanding, prevent conflict, and enhance the achievement of shared goals and commitments. Thank you for taking the time to listen today. I welcome any questions or comments at heatherd.applegarth@gmail.com. I also encourage you to look at the references provided for more information about specific content I mentioned. I wish everyone safety and health during this time. Be well.